All right, so we are going to start our reading of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, book one of the Nicomachean Ethics at least, and we are looking at it from a specific standpoint. That is to say, we are focusing on what Aristotle has to say about human nature. We have to focus on a peculiar way that Aristotle brings up this notion of human nature. Now, to do this, I think it is very important to start by asking a very basic question. What does ethics mean in the title Nicomachean Ethics? Well, if I say ethics in general, you're going to think, rightly, I suppose, about morality. When you think about morality, you're going to think about rules and commands and obligations. And this is certainly a very valid point. Indeed, nowadays, ethics and morality are pretty much synonymous. But when Aristotle wrote this book, the Nicomachean Ethics, the word ethics and ethos, the origin of the word ethics is ethos, had a very specific sense, a very specific meaning that Aristotle knew perfectly well and that we need to remember if we are to enter into Aristotle's texts. So ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, and ethos names a habitual way of living, a mode of life. It names someone's average comportment. It also suggests the idea of a character, a spirit, and interestingly, for our purpose, ethos can be individual or collective. Right? Even today, you can talk about the ethos of the Russian ethos or the Chinese ethos as be suggesting something like a sort of spiritual as well as a way of life that is collectively shared by people of the same culture. Now, this I think is very important because to understand this point about the particular question asked by Aristotle is to understand that we are looking at human nature not so much from the standpoint of naming the characteristic of a species so it can be classified within the broader order of living things. But we are looking at being, at a way of being, at being as a comportment, as a way of existing, of acting, of thinking, of relating to others, of being affected by others. Here, the question about the nature of humanity actually bypasses the question of classification that is so important for instance, the biological sciences as far as Aristotle is concerned, and try to pay attention to the modes of life. And this is the standpoint that Aristotle is asking us to take to understand the ethics. Now, we must start with a question of method. How can we proceed to think through the question of ethics and the question of how to live our lives and what would be the best way of life, the best ethos for us? Well, before trying to even answer this question, we need to step back a little bit for a second and ask ourselves a question of method. That is to say, ask ourselves how we can engage in a question like this, a question of this nature. It turns out that, as far as Aristotle is concerned, each science admits of a given degree of certainty and demonstration. As you may know, besides ethics, Aristotle is pretty famous for his work in logic, in metaphysics, in physics, in biology. Those are different forms of inquiries that different sciences, to use Aristotle's term. And in logic in particular, Aristotle was concerned with discovering, was credited with discovering the rules that make some inferences necessary. That is to say, he discovered that there are patterns of reasoning, they are called syllogism, that are such that one and only one conclusion can follow logically from a set of two premises. And I still wanted to know why is it the case that in some cases it happens and in some other cases it doesn't seem to be working like this. Now, when it comes to the term science that we will encounter early on in our text, Aristotle gives two senses to the word science, or uses the word science in two different acceptions. In the proper sense of the term, science is deductive. That is to say, if a body of knowledge is to count as scientific knowledge, then it must be demonstrative knowledge. Right? We must be able to proceed through deduction to prove not only that this is the conclusion, but that this conclusion is a necessary conclusion. But this model of demonstrability, of deductive knowledge, doesn't work for everything. In particular, when engaging with questions concerning human life and practical matters, that is to say, questions concerned with action, with what to do and how to do those things. Here, which is precisely the concern of the ethics, right? Here, in those cases, precisely, we cannot expect deductive, demonstrable knowledge. In those instances, it's vain to expect the same degree of certainty as you would ask or demand even from someone doing mathematics, geometry. So the first thing I still insist on is that if you want to think about humanity in general, you should not ask for demonstrative knowledge. Now, I think it is really important to understand why this is the case. Now, the key text for us to look at, to try to answer this question, is in chapter 1, and it is at 1094 B12. So chapter 1, 1094 B12. I'm going to read it, and you need to look at it by yourself and read it carefully by yourself, of course. But I'm going to read it and try to make some comments, some remarks to explain a little bit what is going on here. Our inquiry, then, has as its aim these ends, and it is a political inquiry. And it will be adequately discussed if it is presented as clearly as is proper to its subject matter. For, as in handmade articles, precision should not be sought for alike in all discussions. Noble and just things with which politics is concerned have so many differences and fluctuations that they are thought to exist only by custom and not by nature. Good things, too, have such fluctuations because harm has come from them to many individuals. For some men even perish because of wealth, others because of bravery. So in discussing such matters and in using premises concerning them, we should be content to indicate the truth roughly and in outline. And when we deal with things which occur for the most part and use similar premises for them, we should be content to draw conclusions of a similar nature. The listeners, too, should accept each of these statements in the same manner, for it is the mark of an educated man to seek as much precision in things of a given genus as their nature allows. For to accept persuasive arguments from a mathematician appears to be as improper as to demand demonstration from a rhetorician. Now, once again, you will have to go back and study this by yourself carefully, but I would like to try to unpack a little bit what is going on here in this text by making three remarks. So, first remark, from the start. Ethics is concerned with, as Aristotle says, with what is just and noble. This is immediately a political question, says Aristotle. Now, this is very important because the reason behind this claim, right? The reason why Aristotle thinks that this is, of course, this question of ethics is, of course, a political question, which is maybe not so obvious for modern reader, contemporary reader, is that as far as he is concerned, by nature, human beings are social animals. Thus, we cannot expect our ethos, our ways of being and developing our nature, developing our character at its finest, to happen outside of society or independently from society. As far as Aristotle is concerned, ethics is political and politics is ethical. You cannot have one without the other. The virtues cannot exist independently from a social setting. Second remark. It's about what happens at line 15. The question I have is, what is the point Aristotle is making about the good? The goods, actually. Let's look at what he says. He puts it like this. He says, noble and just things with which politics is concerned have so many differences and fluctuations that they are thought to exist only by custom and not by nature. Good things too have such fluctuations because harm has come from them to many individuals. Well, two instances of action that we can both consider to be just, for instance, or noble, for instance, can nevertheless have much more differences than two instances of geometric figures, for instance, that we call triangles. Okay, so we are doing geometry. We say, okay, this figure here is a triangle. And we say, now, this other figure, different, nevertheless, is also a triangle. What Aristotle is saying is that the scale of differences, right, the realm of possible differences between all the things that we call triangle in geometry is smaller than the scale, the whole spectrum of behaviors that we can call by the same name, for instance, of just actions or noble acts. Furthermore, the same action, now this time, second argument, one action itself, right, the one and same one, may be regarded as just in one nation and not so in another nation. This is why, at Aristotle, because of this characteristic, some people have thought that nothing is by nature and that human life is just a matter of conventions. Now, be careful about this. Aristotle says this is why some people have thought that it's just a matter of conventions. He is not endorsing this claim. He's reporting an opinion, a common opinion made by a group of people known as particularly the sophists, according to which every social convention is fundamentally a convention. That is to say that there is no natural necessity behind it. Aristotle does not believe it. He thinks that there are objectively acts that are better than others, things that are noble and things that are not noble, things that are just and things that are unjust, that not everything is matter of arbitrary conventions, that behind those conventions, there is a core that is of greater importance. So just because he's reporting the opinion of those people doesn't mean that he's embracing it. Third remark occurs at line 17 when he says, good things too have such fluctuations because harm has come from them to many individuals. For some men even perished because of wealth, others because of bravery. Okay, good things. Now, some things are not intrinsically good. They can be said to be good, but they are good only in an instrumental way. Instrumental means that they are good for something else, for the sake of another purpose, right? For performing another task of some sort. In other words, if you ask the question, is wealth good? Well, I think that if you ask around you, most people are going to tell you, yes, of course, wealth is a good thing, right? There's little doubt that people are going to hesitate to answer this question. Everybody seems to be convinced that wealth is a good thing. Yet, says Aristotle, there are instances in which some people seeking wealth end up destroying themselves or causing tremendous harm to others. What about courage? Is courage a good thing? Well, again, at first glance, the answer seems to be yes, of course. Everybody would, I suppose, answer the question, would you rather be courageous than coward? By saying, I'd rather be courageous. That seems to be sort of first evidence. Yet again, in some cases, the desire to show your courage has led some people to do absolutely silly things, stupid things, destructive things. In other words, the point that he's making is that there seems to be no universal necessity in matters of human choices. Now, necessity is a specific philosophical term. Something is necessary if its opposite is impossible. Let's take some examples of this. Let's go back again to contrast with mathematics and geometry. Let's take something very, very basic. The distance from the center of a circle to any point on the outside, okay, the radius, is always the same. This is a necessary proposition if we are talking about circles. Like if you have a circle, the distance from the center to the external limit of the circle is always the same. If it were not the case, it would not be a circle. It would be something else, an oval, I guess, or some other geometric figure. In order to be a circle, the distance from the distance of the radius, the size of the radius, the distance from the center to the outside limit of the circle has to be constantly identical to itself. Or it is necessary that, in the case of a circle, it is necessary that the diameter be twice the radius twice equal diameter. Otherwise, it's not a circle. It would be some other figure. So this is necessary because if it were not like this, then it would not be what it is. It could not be. However, there is no necessity in human affairs. And the course of actions, because the premises of our reasonings are true for the most part. For the most part. Not universally and necessarily, but for the most part. The knowledge we can gain about human nature is therefore going to be of the order of what's usually true, not necessarily and demonstratively so. So, if Aristotle is right, by the way, a consequence is that human sciences, the so-called human sciences or social sciences, political science, etc., will never really be scientific, in the same sense that physics, for instance, can be scientific. In other words, what makes, ontologically speaking, the discourse of the Nicomachean ethics possible is the assumption that there are realms of reality that are distinct. The realm of mathematics, logic, and to some extent astronomy is governed by necessity and universality. The realm of human affairs is also history, politics, actions, is governed by contingency and particularity. Contingency means that something has the characteristic of being able to be otherwise than it is. Things are contingent means they could have been otherwise. There is no fundamental necessity in this order of reality. Particular means that although this seems to be working well in those cases, or maybe most of the time, we are going to admit that what is true for the most part is not true universally or necessarily. So to this difference of regions of reality, the logical, mathematical, astronomical order of reality, the human sphere of ways of acting and interacting with each other, and developing our personality through our actions. To this difference of realm of reality corresponds then a difference between, on the one hand, demonstrative knowledge, and on the other hand, domain of human life, beliefs accepted by most people, or at least by the wisest among us, that we can use as premises in our reasoning, but that are not going to lead us to necessary conclusion, but at best to conclusions that are true for the most part.